Well, welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Pearson. I'm the assistant conductor for the Symphony of Northwest Arkansas, and I want to welcome our music director, Paul Haas. Welcome, Paul.
Hey, Sarah, glad to be here with you. Thanks again for
Yes,
doing this.
I'm so glad. Well, we are so excited. Here we are in January 2024. It's like you blink and we're in a new year. We are going to be talking tonight about our upcoming concert on Saturday, January 20th at 7:30 p.m. The Great Unknown. And we have three amazing works lined up for everyone. And we want to talk about them tonight, just and dive in and kind of get our take and perspective on it to be able to give you an inside look on what you can expect and to be able to prepare ahead of time. So, but before we do that, let's just kind of break the ice a little bit. So I had some fun questions for Paul, and I want to get his reaction to this. So this is kind of a deep dive, jump right off. How do you feel the internet has impacted the music industry? And do you think maybe it was similar to the printing press? Same idea.
In some ways, I think that's pretty valid. There's been a large push towards creators and musicians, more specifically, to have more control over the rights to their music and to be able to disseminate it without having gatekeepers in the way, the record labels, etc. And I think to a large extent that's true, and that does echo the Gutenberg press, right? It allowed for wider and cheaper dissemination of works. Of course, now the dissemination is free.
Right. Yeah, because at the time it was just like when Gutenberg invented it, it was just the Roman Catholic Church that had that access or nobility.
Right. I mean, they had those guys up in the cloisters copying away and making beautiful manuscripts that only a few people would ever see. But yeah, so I think that the big hiccup, the way I see it, has been just the on the compensation side of things. The artists have gotten well, they haven't been compensated.
Oh, it's shared.
So you look at something like Spotify. I as an artist have albums up there, and I've never seen a dime from Spotify, even though they have multiple downloads, right? So and streams, and so I think it's great to say you have music on Spotify and Apple Music and all these places, but the compensation isn't there quite yet. Now I think we're at an interesting point in time. There's with the advent of the decentralized internet, with Web3, you've got projects out there that are, it's really interesting. They're allowing you to create, as an artist, allowing you to create NFTs that are kind of like shares in either your piece or your success overall. Just basically allowing people to own a little chunk of you as
like
a creator.
stocks.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so if you do well, they do well. And so it incentivizes your fans to go out there and advocate on your behalf, because then they get rewarded.
That's actually a really creative way to
interesting
do
model.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
And so I do think that the internet and Web 2.0 made big progress in terms of being able to blog and use social media. But I think this idea of real ownership of the rights to your music and the ability to parcel that out to people who want to be a part of it, that's a big thing. And that's just happening, over the past couple of years, and hasn't, most artists aren't even part of that.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And I thinking about even like our composers on this concert, we have Barber, we have Gershwin, we have
Awesome.
yeah. And so I mean, all of them, the internet was not around when they were composing. I wonder what their thoughts would be on that as well. Be like similar to them. Like, what is this?
I think Dawson wouldn't have had decades of not being played. Right. I mean, he literally got a couple of performances in the few years after it was premiered in, I think it was 1934.
Yeah, stretch without it.
Right. And then he did a redo of the piece, I think in the 50s, and that
Yeah, like
got
he revamped the percussion or something on it.
right. So some new rhythms.
Yeah.
And then it literally, and so that got a couple of performances, and then it just sat on the shelf
Yeah.
until I think 2020,
Yeah, and
which
then
is just
Naxos took over
absurd.
and did a recording of it.
Yeah, and so this is a piece that was premiered by the Philadelphia Orchestra,
Mm.
right? I mean, it doesn't get much better than that.
No.
And then it just sat. And it's a phenomenal piece. It's not like
Yeah.
it's not
Incredible
like it's
writing.
lacking in any way,
Yeah.
right?
It's
Uh,
incredible writing. Well, why don't we talk about that one first, since we're kind of already looking at that? Is that cool with you?
yeah, sure, that's
About
fine.
his work. Yeah, so William Dawson, his Negro Folk Symphony, it's a new work for Sona to perform. But I think it further aligns with our mission to present underrepresented composers, and he definitely would be considered that. He came
Like
under
in
the,
in spades.
yeah,
Absolutely. I
even
mean,
his other colleagues at the time, looking at Florence Price and some of the other ones that have had a lot more limelight, right, most recently, his is still not. And so I'm super excited we're premiering and playing it.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, anything that we can do, I mean, um as a field, not just as an orchestra, but as a
Yeah,
field, anything we can do to make sure that the best work of of the past comes to light, like that it behooves us to do that, right? It's an
yeah.
important and it's an important goal, and clearly one that we're taking seriously.
Yeah. I mean, he reminds me in some ways of some of our early composers from even the Baroque and classical period. I mean, at the
Yeah.
age of 13, running away to go to the Tuskegee
Right.
Institute, because he wanted to study and do music. I'm like, how many 13-year-olds do you know that they already know that that's what they want to do and are that talented? It's just amazing.
Right. It's funny, actually. It reminds me of the story about Barber, whose music
Okay.
we're doing is Symphony in One Movement. How how his around the same age,
Mhm.
his parents were trying to make him into an athlete and play football and all that. And I read this little letter that he wrote to his mom. It's so cute. He's basically saying, I appreciate that you want me to be athlete, but that's just not who I am.
Right.
And I know I don't want you to get mad at me, and I don't want you to tell me to just calm down and it'll all blow
Right.
over and then you can go back to playing football. It's like, I am a composer.
So interesting. So many people that we know of, past composers down through time, have experienced something like that. Some of the best.
Right.
With
It's like I have to do
Yeah,
this. Anyways, I thought that was a side story, just to remind me, because it was around the same period of time when Dawson ran away in order to
yeah,
pursue his calling.
yeah.
So
And he didn't have an easy time of it. Like he got his degree there, but and at his graduation, wasn't it Dawson, that at his own graduation his work was premiered and played, but he couldn't even be recognized for it, which is so, just incredible, not cool.
yeah, no, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
He was I'm pretty sure he was doing manual labor
Oh yeah, totally.
as a farmhand to pay his
Yeah,
tuition.
it was.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is a guy who is like the opposite of Samuel Barber.
Mhm.
Who Samuel Barber had everything. He had famous parents, a composer and a leading singer at the Met Opera as his
Mhm.
parents. They
Yeah.
did everything for him. And here's a guy, William Dawson, who had nothing and just had to get everything through sheer grit and determination. So
Yeah.
an amazing story.
Yeah, and like then his journey to go to Chicago and to study for his master's, and how he played first trombone, was it with the Chicago Civics Orchestra?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah,
like that's a group I know of today. I
yeah.
actually I was surprised to read that.
Mhm.
That's a really amazing connection.
Yeah. I mean, just to see his journey, like that there's no box that, people think that It's similar to like what Barber has, but for him, it was not. And I think that is a great role model for students today that are striving to be composers or musicians or whatnot, the not let the challenges inhibit them from finding their dreams and their goals.
Yeah, no, it's a really inspiring story. I mean, honestly, it doesn't have that happy of an ending, unfortunately.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, let's it just to basically have it sit on a shelf. Well, actually, if the ending is today, then it does have a happy ending because
Yeah,
people are
that's true.
finally discovering it. But
Very true.
man, he had to basically bash his head on a brick wall for 75 years
Yeah.
to have anything happen. Anyway, just a remarkable story. The symphony itself, it's one of these works where you listen to it and the greatness of it is immediately apparent. So you don't have to go through any, oh, is this a good piece of music? No, it's great right
Yeah.
off the start, and he's so compositionally gifted and has such a unique voice that's
Yeah.
so uniquely American and not like any other
Yeah.
uh composer we can think of. I mean, obviously has
Yeah.
his inspirations, but no, he's just a phenomenal composer.
Yeah. And
And
he even
so,
brings out in the symphony, like in each movement, it's almost as he's telling a story, right, of the history, right? The
oh
opening movement
yeah, I mean,
is talking about emotions and expressions of African American people, and then the second movement is lamenting, like that anguish.
yeah, I mean, this is a very programmatic work. You could listen to it, and it actually bears listening to it this way, with sort of without any knowledge of the story of what he was trying to represent with it. But it also has this deeper layer of what he was trying to say with it, right? So the idea that a people was taken from their land and cast on the shores of a really inhospitable and inhumane culture, that then just didn't allow it to flourish, kept it under bondage for an incredibly long time. This is a story that well had to be told over and over, still has to be told over and over. And so he does that in a different way in each movement, as you referred to before. I mean, the first movement, he has a lot of his own melodies that
Mhm.
he uses, but he mixes in melodies from other spirituals, from actual spirituals.
Yeah.
And it's a haunting movement. It tells you, even if you don't know uh, the sort of the program behind it, you
Mhm.
can tell that it's sad, right? That there's something wrong, something missing here.
Yeah.
Um, and as you go through, I mean, I'm sure you hear this as well. I mean, it's the second movement, the Hope in the Night.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really um it's heartbreaking, right? It's incredible. It's powerful music. I guess it's sort of crying out for all from all the pain uh, of an entire people for 2.5 centuries. Just unbelievable. The imagery and the emotion that comes out in this music, it's so strong and something that I mean, we all have to hear this, and we haven't had the opportunity until now.
I think
So
it's going
just
to be a monumental night. I mean, not as the musicians work on it and you lead it for the week, it's going to just be amazing and not to be missed. That people are going to want to hear this. That it's
yeah,
gonna be
I
an
mean,
experience.
it's just when I heard it for the time, I referenced this before, but when I heard it for the first time, I just couldn't believe
Mm,
that this wasn't in the standard repertoire.
right? Yeah.
It's unthinkable to me.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
anyway,
some of the lesser known themes that he has coming out of it are like, "Oh, let me shine." I think these are all spirituals, or and "Hallelujah, Lord, I've been down to the sea." These are all things, and it kind of reflective again of how he was feeling oppressed, I think, through his journey that were coming out in these.
Right. And using the musical language
Mhm.
of the people
Yeah.
who, of his people who had been oppressed
Yes.
through all that time.
Yeah. So I think
Um,
it coincides together.
right. I mean, this is a story that has to be told, has to be heard,
I agree.
has to be felt. Anyway, so it's a real privilege to be able to bring this to our audiences,
Yeah.
and to be, to be one of the first orchestras to do it, right? In this new rediscovery of William Dawson.
Yeah.
It's really it's special.
Yeah, I think so. And it lines up with our theme of the great unknown. We're diving into an unknown work that I think will be quickly come very memorable
Yeah.
in that way. So let's go to another work. We'll end with the barber, but let's talk about Gershwin. It's definitely an iconic work played by orchestras across the world. Music. What do you think it is particularly though about Gershwin, and maybe the piece that we're going to be playing in American in Paris? What is it about his works that draw people or musicians?
Well, I guess two words sum it up. It's Gershwin,
Right?
right? I mean, Gershwin is Gershwin.
Yeah.
There's such a joy to it, such a humor. It's just it's every person, right? It is for everyone. It's not just for fancy people and smart people and rich people. No, I mean Gershwin is for
Yeah.
everyone. And you can't listen to Gershwin, and it's specifically this piece, American in Paris, without, tapping your toes, just kind of shaking your head, closing your eyes, imagining that you're in a film. Like this is kind of like, sometimes I feel like it's the soundtrack to my life when things are going really well.
I love it. Well, yeah, later on they did. I don't know how many people know this. Obviously, we're going to play it, American in Paris, as he wrote it, the symphonic work. But in 1951, right, with Gene Kelly, it was actual movie.
Yeah. No, I mean, and again, this one has very very much a program in mind.
Yeah.
Gershwin spent some formative years. Let's see, I think was he born 1898 or something like that?
Yeah.
Anyway, so in the 20s, when he was 20 something,
Yeah.
he spent some time in Paris,
Yeah.
and all those stories, the apocryphal stories about, oh, he met Ravel and said, oh, will you teach me? And Ravel says something to the effect of, well, why would I teach you to be a second-rate Ravel when you're already a first-rate Gershwin?
I love that because
And
I
that's amazing. And I think Stravinsky said something similar to him. He even asked Schoenberg. Can you imagine? He asked Schoenberg if Schoenberg would teach him composition.
that
And
little
and,
Schinker
and Schoenberg
analysis,
basically said the same thing. I could teach you to be a bad Schoenberg, but why don't you just want to be an amazing Gershwin?
right? Be the best
So
that you can be, right?
right. So he went to Paris,
Mhm.
and just like
1926.
just like just like Copland, and just like all these American composers who went to Paris to study with Nadia Boulanger.
Mhm.
And she, of course, took all those composers in and taught them, gave them craft, all this stuff. Gershwin went to her and she said,
Oh,
I have nothing to teach you. Just go be yourself. I mean,
I think that's so cool.
can you imagine what a natural musician he was. He just sort of was himself.
Yeah.
And it's like he didn't have to study. He went out on the streets, uh you know again in his early childhood, and just played the heck out of the piano and sold songs and composed, and was treated badly for a long time, and then finally got his breaks. And
Right. Yeah.
what an amazing uh person,
Mhm.
composer, style. I mean, he is himself and iconic. right?
And he was so creative. Like, even like we'll give us some secrets away to our patrons, but like here in America in Paris, right? An American in Paris, he wanted it to be so realistic to what his time he spent in Paris that he went and researched the different horns on the taxis in Paris,
Yep.
right? And he brought those back and had them like mounted on a board, like I don't know, 5 or 6 different horns. There's like a picture of it. And so that he would get like the true horns. I'm like, who does that? I don't know any composers that would necessarily do that during that time, but he did.
Yeah, I know. And it's yeah, those taxi horns, they're a whole step
Right.
apart.
Yeah.
And so he's got this American tourist almost get killed like
It's like a crash.
one time after the next in
Right.
this piece. So maybe I don't really want it to be the soundtrack of my life, but
Yeah.
always good to have some excitement.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, uh, I think we should at least acknowledge the fact that this is a substitution, right? That we were
Okay.
going to have the world premiere of a new piano concerto,
Yes.
but the soloist was unable to make the premiere for personal reasons, and here we go.
Right.
Instead of that, we have one of the best pieces ever written, and I guess it's not really the great unknown anymore because
No, it's not, but it
this
is.
third piece is very known.
Yes, and it is. It's to me, it's just like the Dawson. It's just like one of those that not only is his going to be amazing, right? But then I feel like it's a night of like amazing music gifts. Like each one of them on their own are incredible, but to have all three in one concert, it's kind of like what was it? The Beethoven. There was like a monster concert. There was like Beethoven 5, the choral fantasy. He like packed like a couple
Oh,
symphonies
right.
all at once. I kind of feel like that's what we're trying to do here a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I think that concert may have been a little bit too long,
Yeah,
but
this one won't be that long, so don't like worry.
right. No, I mean, yeah, what a pleasure. And the other connecting thread here is that, they're all American, number
Oh yeah.
one. But then the other amazing thing is that they were all written basically within 10 years of each other,
Mhm.
right? So I think an American in Paris was the late 20s.
Yeah, like
And
1928. Yeah.
yeah, and then the Dawson was 1934, I think, and then uh the Barber was 1930, sorry, yeah, 1936, I
Yeah.
believe it
So just
was.
right there.
And so I mean, American 19, late 1920s, 30s, basically Depression era, late 20s, and then through the Depression.
Yeah.
Really a snapshot of history seen through very, very different eyes, clearly.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at Barber. We'll finish with him tonight. His work, Symphony in One Movement, which I want to talk a little bit about that. That's very interesting, right? Most symphonies are in 3, 4 movements, but his is in one movement. What do you think he was trying to try to say about this piece, just even in the
Yeah.
title?
Well, I mean, I think in some ways Barber had a little Brahms in him, right? He's very formalistic, right? He's very structural thinker,
Yeah.
and so he actually came out and said that this was paying homage to Sibelius' Seventh Symphony, which is also in one movement, which is written just a few years before this.
Mhm.
And so you can kind of see how this may have just been an experiment on his part, very successful experiment.
Right.
And so yeah, I mean, I think that at this point, when you're in the 1930s and you've had Schoenberg and you've had Berg and you've had Webern and you've had all of this musical cultural ferment that has basically busted down any boundaries and walls that were there before. I mean, it's kind of like you can do pretty much whatever you want. So what you do has to be very, you know, you have to do something interesting. There has to be a reason for what you do, because as a composer, uh, I'm when I'm writing a piece of music, one of the first things I do is I set boundaries for myself,
Mhm.
right? Because if you're totally free, then it's just it's just scattershot improv,
Evidence of
whatever.
structure.
Right, but it's when you impose those boundaries on yourself that the piece starts to take shape, right? It's almost like creating the mold for the like the cast for the statue, or whatever you want to think about it in that way. So anyway, for him, clearly he wanted to have the fullness of a symphonic expression,
Yeah.
right? So the fullness of a complete symphony, but in much the same way that other composers had in the past, he wanted to have one part immediately on the next, and then on the next, and on the next. Just really have it be a flowing expression of that larger form, right? Yeah. And it's not like this isn't broken up into different sections. There are definitely different sections. It's just that it's all meant to go attacca, one to the next, the next, to the next.
Yeah. And attacca for a patron just means without pause, right?
Right, yeah. So yeah, composers will actually write the word attacca in the music if they want you to go right on and not take a break. Right. He doesn't do that here, but he does it in the title. He says one minute. So exactly. you better keep going. But no, this music, everybody knows Samuel Barber, right? Yeah. I mean, but why do they know him? They know him primarily for the Adagio for strings, which is the string orchestra version of the slow movement of his first string quartet, which he wrote also in the 1930s, in the early 30s. I believe when he was in Italy.
Yeah, and it was also vocals too. He was like really big on vocals. Like,
oh, I mean, he was a phenomenal singer, apparently. And so we know him through the Adagio for strings, because that's sort of the soundtrack to everybody's sad moments in their lives. And yeah, so this was a great opportunity to take another fantastic work by Barber, the same guy who we all know and love, but this is something that not many people have heard, especially outside, say, the New Yorks and the Bostons and the Philadelphias and San Franciscos, and the big orchestras. You aren't going to get a lot of performances of this in the smaller regional orchestras, and so this is a phenomenal opportunity to do just that.
I'm so excited for it. And it has, like I was saying earlier, that each of these works has something truly amazing that we're bringing to the table for our guests on this concert. And it's definitely not one to miss. I mean, like you're saying, it would have to go to New York or to Philly to be able to hear this work in general live, because it's just not performed very often, and it should be, yeah. But it's not.
Yeah, exactly. And I was referencing Brahms earlier. I mean, I think there really is, there's something else about Barber that's a little bit like Brahms, is that in some ways he's very retrospective. He goes back to old forms in his music. He clearly has a modern voice and a modern sensibility, but he packs that into a very into a structure that is defined by lineage, right, through the centuries. And so, I mean, just as an example of that, in what we're going to call the last movement of his one movement symphony, the last sort of mini movement, he's got this chaconne, basically, that goes over and over again. It's a repeated bass line that has more and more eloquent, passionate melodies and counter melodies stacking on top of it, dynamics going louder and louder and louder, more and more forceful, more and more passionate. It's I mean, if I spoke those words and you were hearing, Bach's chaconne in D minor for the fiddle, like I could be speaking about that. Yeah. So it really is, he does take these older forms and imbue them with modern life and sensibility. It's
Almost neoclassicism, Baroque, Romantic, mixed together. Yeah.
right. It's like a decade too late to be in with like the Stravinsky Pulcinellos
Right.
and all that. All of that big push of
Right.
neoclassicism. But that's a movement that stayed with us, right?
Right.
They started to call it neo-romanticism instead of neoclassical
Right.
in the 70s and 80s. But yeah, I mean, this idea of not forgetting where we came from. It's comforting, I think, as a listener to hear that stuff, to hear those elements that we're used to that ground us. And that's certainly on full display in the
I like how
Barber.
you describe it as like a lineage, looking back, like
Yeah.
remembering where you came from. That's a really great way to put it.
Yeah, well, I mean, Barber and Brahms, I think, possibly Mendelssohn as well. These are the giants who always knew whose shoulders they stood on.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have some powerhouses on this concert for sure, from Dawson to Barber to Gershwin. As we wrap up today, Paul, is there anything else that you want to say to our listeners, our audience, as they prepare to come to this concert?
I mean, just get excited. You can tell how excited I am, how excited
Yes.
Sarah is about this music. I mean, you just will not want to miss this at all. And when that day comes and it's cold outside, who knows what the weather is going to be like, just know that it's worth it. It's worth it to get into the hall, be with us, your extended family, and let's celebrate this just astonishing music together.